Thanks for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. Again, we do want to stay on top of some of these stories that are coming into our newsroom, and one that we've been following very closely over the last week. Want to put this up there, a live vantage point that we have in New York City, as this week of testimony there in the Diddy federal criminal trial has officially wrapped up with his ex-girlfriend, the star prosecution witness there, Cassie Ventura, ending up her time there on the stand. I want to turn to our partners there at Fox, Nate Foy. He has an update on some of the information that we learned in court.
Sean Diddy Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, wrapped up her second day under cross-examination in Combs' federal sex trafficking trial.
She's doing a great job.
She can be criminally charged.
She's not nervous.
Diddy's attorneys showed text messages that Ventura sent in the days after surveillance video captured Combs assaulting her at a Los Angeles hotel in 2016. She told the rapper, quote, "I'm not a rag doll. I'm somebody's child." His team admits to domestic violence, but denies all sex trafficking allegations, trying to portray the 11-year relationship as complicated but loving, and that Ventura willingly participated in their so-called freak-offs.
This is a question not of whether Sean Combs was violent. It's not a question of whether he was a terrible person. It's a question of whether they had engaged in this interstate commerce for the purpose of sex trafficking.
Meanwhile, pop star Justin Bieber is reportedly shutting down rumors that he was a victim of Diddy's after social media posts raised concerns about the pop star's mental health. Sources tell TMZ Bieber became friends with Diddy's sons, Justin and Quincy, and any interactions he had with Combs were, quote, performative. His reps tell TMZ, quote, although Justin is not among Sean Combs' victims, there are individuals who were genuinely harmed by him. Shifting focus away from this reality detracts from the justice these victims rightfully deserve. Combs faces at least 15 years and up to life in prison if convicted. Reporting in New York, Nate Foy, Fox News.
Our thanks to Nate Foy for that update. And of course, we do want to continue on with our coverage here. I was able to speak to TMZ a bit earlier today to break down more of what we heard in court and what things are looking like as we head into the next week. Let's go ahead and go to this conversation that I had there with Michael Babcock. Now from Fox, I'm your host, Christina Evans. Well, it's the trial that has everyone's attention. I want to show you this look we have outside of that New York courtroom, where we now officially know that Cassie Ventura, Sean Diddy Combs' ex-girlfriend, is one of his accusers, and she testified for nearly 20 hours over the last 4 days in his federal criminal trial. She described physical abuse and said that she endured some of the worst during their relationship, detailing how Combs orchestrated drug-fueled sex performances that he called freak-offs. So we've learned quite a lot in the days that this trial has been ongoing. And I now want to bring into the conversation with TMZ, Michael Babcock. He's been following this from the very beginning. And I had to say, Michael, we've all been glued to our screens watching and waiting for news updates to come out of court today. And it's official. Cassie's time there on the stand coming to an end.
You're exactly right, Christina. Obviously, it was a long 4 days for Cassie this week. As you pointed out, nearly 20 hours on the stand. First 2 days, she was questioned by prosecutors. The last 2 days, she has been cross-examined by Diddy's defense team. And it was obviously an incredibly emotional time for her, as her attorney, as they left the courtroom today, explained to the media that was waiting to hear from them. She called it challenging but empowering. Hope that it would be helpful to other survivors out there who have watched her over the last couple of days. But you've got to imagine, to relive what was a perilous time in her life had to be incredibly difficult for Cassie this week.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because, yeah, that was one of the quotes that the lawyer did say today outside of the courtroom. She said, I hope that my testimony has given strength and a voice to other survivors and can help those who have suffered to speak up and heal from that fear and abuse as well. That's really what we heard for her. It was all about the abuse there on the stand, saying that she was basically tortured by Diddy in some senses. She didn't want to participate in these, what he's calling freak-offs. But, of course, that cross-examination is so tough because those defense attorneys did their best to refute those claims by pulling out text messages showing that Cassie had initiated some of those interactions.
That's exactly right. And I'm not envious of the position that Diddy's lawyers were in here, because you've got this a woman on the stand who is 8+ months pregnant. She is clearly been through a heck of an ordeal. Even if you say, hey, she went along with all the freak offs, we know that she was brutalized in that hotel hallway by Diddy, and we've seen it on tape. So for them to try and discredit her, but not attack her personally, that's not an easy job. And, luckily for them, they are very talented attorneys, and they did their best. And I think by many accounts, they did a good job for their client. But they brought up old text messages showing what looked like, at least at times, a really warm relationship between Cassie and Diddy. And that obviously was not done by accident. The point there is, look, this is not they might have gotten into some out there things in the bedroom that most people might not engage in on a daily basis. But I think the point they were trying to make was that these were two consenting adults who made a decision to do this, to get down with this kind of activity, not a situation where Diddy coerced Cassie into doing these things. And I think at the end of the day, that is the bottom line here, because this is not an assault case. So you can see the video of Diddy and Cassie in the hallway and see him pushing her and hitting her, but it's not an assault case. His innocence or guilt is not going to be judged by whether he struck her. This is about sex trafficking and racketeering, and that's what's at stake here.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I do think, especially on social media, the plot can sort of get lost for folks who aren't in the courtroom or maybe don't even have some sort of legal background to understand truly what Diddy is on trial for. But I want to point out something. You mentioned that video that we all saw in the hotel room, and putting up this tweet from TMZ saying that Cassie on the stand admitted that she is about to get $10 million from that Intercontinental Hotel, in which that beating, that video came out from. Yeah. Do you think that this is going to ultimately affect that and the outcome? Because it's interesting to see how she's had to admit that she received that $20 million settlement from Diddy as well, now admitting that she's receiving another $10 million from the hotel itself where that video came from.
Yeah, look, it's certainly a lot of money, and you never know how a jury is going to react to something. I mean, the reality is, that lawsuit that Cassie filed, I think you could make a really strong argument that really got the ball rolling on a lot of what now has obviously played out with the investigation and ultimately the criminal charges and now the trial. I don't think without Cassie taking that first massive step, I don't know that we are here. We're here today in this courtroom with Diddy facing these really serious charges. So, yeah, I suppose that you might have someone out there who might look at this in a cynical way and say that Cassie's doing this for money. You never know, again, how people are going to react to something. But at the end of the day, this is a incident that happened on March 5th, 2016. And ultimately does not come out, that video, until years and years later. There was testimony earlier in the week about Diddy trying to allegedly bribe a hotel worker to make sure that tape was buried. So, point being, there were really great lengths taken here to make sure that never saw the light of day. Obviously, they didn't work because it did ultimately come to the public eye, and everyone now has seen it. But I don't know that that's really going to be held against Cassie here. I don't think it likely will.
All right, another thing that has been really interesting today coming out of court, Dawn Richards. People may have heard of her. She's the former member of Danity Kane, which of course was signed to Diddy's label, but she also was in a group with him herself. The three of them were a part of Dirty Money. She took the stand as well. What did we sort of learn from her testimony, and what are we really looking at to learn as far as the interactions that happened between Cassie and Diddy and others that were just in that inner circle at the time?
I mean, I think, look, Cassie's the most high-profile witness by far, and that video is the most high-profile piece of evidence. But the reality is, too, that there are multiple other victims here, alleged victims, 4 of them. And I think with the testimony, hearing from people like Dawn and hearing from other members of groups that Diddy managed and people that he was around, it adds a whole bunch of really necessary context as to what was going on. Because, again, the question goes back to, at the end of the day, people, for the most part, are allowed to do what they want in their bedroom. But what you're not allowed to do is coerce and bribe and pressure people to doing this sort of behavior if they don't want to do it themselves, if it's not, their own free will and volition. So I think, it's incredibly important to talk to people who are around and in Diddy's life during that time. And obviously, Dawn is somebody who was. And the reality, again, with these freak-offs is this is not a situation where it was just one-on-one Diddy and Cassie. You're talking about other people, potentially celebrities, sex workers, other people who were part of these freak-offs. So I think, this is the first week. This is only really day 5, if you don't count the jury selection. And to think that we've got like 7 or 8, possibly more, 9, 10 weeks of testimony left, I think we're going to be hearing from a lot of other people. And Cassie, most high profile, probably most important, but a lot of other people are going to have really important testimony that I think will ultimately, determine whether Diddy is innocent or guilty here and whether he spends the rest of his life in a prison cell.
Absolutely. I want to show this video that we just got a few moments ago from Diddy's sons leaving the courtroom. All 3 of them have been present all week long. His daughters haven't been present all of the days. Of course, some of that very challenging testimony that was happening there in court. When you see his sons, though, outside of the courthouse, as well as Alex Fine, Cassie's husband, it is really a family affair when it comes to what's happening there in the courtroom as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Diddy, his family, like you said, minus his daughters, have been there. They've been supporting him. At times, they have left the courtroom. Same thing with Alex Fine, Cassie's husband. Obviously, he wants to be there for her, but there are incredibly challenging things being talked about. And you've got to imagine it's got to be really difficult for him to listen to these things and to listen to his wife recount these things that she says she went through, all the while she's sitting up there, about to give birth here any day. So I think they're doing their best to be there for their significant others on, whether it's a witness or whether it's Diddy's family. But yeah, very, very challenging for them to have to hear these things. I'm not envious of their position here.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, Michael Babcock, I do want to ask you about this. You all there at TMZ have done a lot of coverage of Justin Bieber, of course, the mega celebrity. Yeah. We also know that Diddy and Justin met when he was just 15 years old. This has led to ultimate speculation online about the nature of their relationship. Did Justin Bieber suffer any of this alleged abuse at the hands of Diddy? But you all have some exclusive sources, as you always do, talking about the relationship. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, a lot of people have brought up some of these old clips of Diddy and Justin together and have speculated that perhaps something happened to Justin. Justin says no, absolutely not true. His people say no, not true. It was actually, they say, really, it was more of a performative friendship that Justin was this up-and-coming young kid in the industry, was becoming a superstar. Diddy was this mogul. And it made sense for them to sort of play up this friendship. But in reality, Justin, mid-teen, 15 years old, Diddy in his 40s at the time, they had nothing in common. So they weren't really even friends who spent time together. If anything, if they were ever together, it was actually Justin and Quincy and Justin, Diddy's son Justin, that were friends. So Justin, relationship with Diddy's kids, no real actual meaningful friendship with P. Diddy, all for show.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up. Again, TMZ's Michael Babcock here to help us wrap up what has been a very intriguing week there in court in New York. Of course, we'll be checking in with you all as we learn more details as this trial continues on.
Anytime. Thanks so much for having me.